do you think people's concerns are, though, about the not just the food supply issue, but even just what it would do to the market prices of sugar cane and how that would impact food supplies? I mean, if you have a more international market for ethanol from sugar cane, would that cause problems for food supplies?
Could you repeat the question?
How in the U.S. certainly there's this concern that if we use corn for ethanol, there won't be corn to eat,
Yes.
which is inaccurate because of the amount of corn that we actually eat. Most of that corn, like you said, is feedstock. But in Brazil, the price of ethanol does fluctuate with the price of sugar.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if someplace like Africa joined the market, what would that do to sugar prices, and how would that intersect with food prices?
Well, the price of sugar fluctuates a lot. We know that from history. There is a long history of sugar producing. And the price of ethanol has fluctuated a little bit too. But see, if you have the option of producing either ethanol or sugarcane, you compensate for that to some extent. What happened actually here, and this is one of the reasons why the sugar producers in 1973, 75 became so enthusiastic about ethanol, because at that time there was a surplus of sugar in the international market. So the price went down. And the government did open a new market, because the distilleries are organized in such a way that it just takes a minor decision, from a technical viewpoint. Either you produce ethanol or you produce sugar. So actually producing the two products is a guarantee against price fluctuations. So it helps stabilizing the price. And I think that if more countries enter into the market, I think there will be more competition, which will help stabilize the price. That did not happen. I think your question is a very provocative question, because it remains to be seen. But I think from past experience with other agricultural products, the more producers you have, the more stable are the prices of commodities.
In terms of the bigger picture, you mentioned that the technology is not there yet for cellulosic biofuel,
Yes.
but you still advocate for expanding sugarcane fuel. Can you talk about, just in terms of right now, the pressures on having better energy and having more energy and renewable energy, and why transitional things, like even if the technology changes and advances? Because I think something that we encounter, we talk to people, is that they want an all or nothing solution. They either want something that is going to last forever, or they want to maintain the status quo. And you're talking about something that would be a positive step forward, but not necessarily the end all,
A complete solution,
Yeah.
you mean? Look, I think the most important driver for renewable energies is climate change. I know that presently in the United States, people are trying to belittle the consequences of climate change, and concerns about climate change, which were sort of pretty high a few years ago, seem to be less dominant at the moment. There are reasons for that. One of them is the economic crisis, so people have, let's say, more immediate concerns. But the stark reality is climate change is not going to go away, because we are using fossil fuels. The consumption of fossil fuels is still growing every year, and we are throwing increasing quantities of carbon in the atmosphere. And this is happening. People are becoming impatient because they keep asking, where are the consequences of global change? And this is very present today in the debates involving the choice of candidates for the Republican Party and so on and so forth. Now, what you hear from my colleagues is that the problem of climate change is not going away, it's getting worse. Then you say, well, give me some evidence, you know. Then you begin to say, well, you know, the sea level is going up, the glaciers are receding, and all that and so on. But that is really not very impressive, you know, because the sea level grows, it is raising, you know, 1 millimeter per year. 1 millimeter is not very much, you know, so you have to wait 10 years until the sea level raises 1 centimeter. So all these answers, I realize that, you know, because I'm asked all the time, where is the consequence of global change? Then the glaciers are receding. Then, you know, you show a picture of, you know, somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, you know, in which a glacier receded 500 meters. Okay, then someone else shows you another picture in which the glacier has increased. So really, I don't think we have had so far very convincing examples, but there is one. And that, I think, has not been discussed very much, but it's real. The number of extreme climatic events is increasing in a very, very clear and quantifiable way. You know, look at the amount of floods that we had.
Wait for this plane. This is fascinating. You've never made climate change sound more interesting. All right, we're good. You were listing the natural disasters.
Yes. So people keep asking. Let me start a little. Go back. People ask what are the clear evidence. There is one clear evidence for climate change, which is the frequency of extreme events. One of the predictions of climate change theories is that the number of events, climatic events, extreme climatic events, like floods, droughts, all kinds of natural events will become even more frequent than they are today. And there is very clear evidence that that's happening. You know, look at the floods in Thailand, you know. 3 months ago, you know, a third of Thailand was underwater, you know. You know, there are floods in Thailand every year, you know, but you didn't get a third of Thailand underwater, you know. And you have this all over the place. Look at what's happening in China. And in other places you have droughts. You know, in big countries like Brazil, you have either flooding in Acre. Acre is a state up in the north, and then you have tremendous drought in the south, in Rio Grande do Sul, at the same time. And you can quantify that, and it is happening. Actually, the city of São Paulo is a wonderful example of that, you know, because it rains a lot in São Paulo in the summer, but the rains were distributed in time. You know, in January, February, the summer months, you know, January, February, March, it rains a lot. But the rain was distributed along the day. Now, it doesn't rain during the day anymore, which is great, you know, if you want to benefit from the swimming pool or the beach, it's great. Then when it rains at the end of the day, in half an hour, it rains all the amount of water that used to rain distributed over the day. And this is why we have flooding in many parts of São Paulo every day of the summer months. You know, and theory predicts that. So it's not a question of changing the amount of precipitation, it's the way precipitation comes. And so I think people have not been explaining clearly enough that climate change is here and it's happening. You know, it's very popular to have the naysayers, you know. They say, well, theories have not been confirmed, maybe this is not real. You know, there are some scientists in England that falsify data or whatever and so on. Look, ask insurance companies. Insurance companies will give you the number of extreme events that are happening much more frequently than in the past. I think that's one of the main drivers of moving into renewables. Not only ethanol, of course, but wind and other forms of renewables. And as you know, the investments in renewables are increasing very significantly. Today, there are more investments in renewables than in other sources of energy. People have argued that maybe nuclear energy could be the solution, because nuclear energy indeed does not result in emissions of carbon. There are two problems with nuclear energy. One are accidents which, it's something that's impossible to solve. I mean, it is of the nature of accidents that accidents happen, And when accidents happens with nuclear reactors, they are very serious. But I don't think that's the dominant factor. The dominant factor is that nuclear energy is expensive. And the amount of investment in wind and biofuels and cogeneration of electricity using wood and so on and so forth has surpassed the investments in fossil energies and nuclear energies in the last 5 years. So this is happening.
And one of the great advantages of biofuel is that it fits into our existing infrastructure. Because I know people talk about potential for, especially in terms of transportation, electric vehicles, but then you have to worry about where you can charge your car or whatever. And maybe you could just talk a little bit about how biofuel is already very compatible.
Yes, with the experience of biofuels that we developed here in Brazil, we learned a number of things. For example, it generates lots of jobs, which is a very good thing. And all governments are concerned in generating jobs. The production of ethanol in Brazil it generates 1 million jobs. So it's an important source of jobs. Then you say, okay, you can use ethanol for transportation to replace gasoline. Maybe a better method of doing it would be to use electricity. Let's, instead of changing the fuel, change the motor of the automobile. Instead of using one of these motors that use either gasoline or ethanol, they are called internal combustion engines. Let's forget that, put an electric motor. That's not a outlandish idea, 100 years ago when the automobile age started, people tried that, There are two problems. First, batteries are not very good so far. The batteries that we use, and we do use batteries to start your automobile, but to get it out a large enough number of batteries to run your automobile for 200 kilometers, is staggering, Most of the automobiles that use batteries have to carry 500 kilograms of batteries in the car. So you have to make better batteries. Well, people learn how to make batteries because of cellular phones. The batteries used in cellular phones use lithium. They are better and store electricity better. The amount of lithium in the world is limited. People are having troubles with that. And the companies in Detroit try to produce electric automobiles with the batteries that are used in the present, and they are not doing very well. So there is a problem there, which are the batteries. But it will be eventually solved, the same way as the batteries for cellular phones has been solved. Computers use lithium batteries. It will be solved, I'm sure. But then you have a problem. If you have the batteries, they are not. If they are better, you don't need 500 kilograms of batteries in your car. You can do it with 100 kilograms or so. Then there's a problem. The electricity has to come from somewhere. Where will it come from? In the United States, most of the electricity comes from burning coal. So if you are concerned with greenhouse warming, you are transferring the problem from one place to another. It's true, your car, if it's an electric car, running in New York, will not be polluting. It will not make any noise, it will not emit carbon, will sound wonderful, But somewhere in the United States, I don't know, maybe in Wyoming, or people will be producing the electricity that ultimately runs your car. And therefore, you are really transferring the place where the carbon is emitted. The only places where electric cars could really make a dent on reducing carbon emissions are countries in which the electricity is produced from hydroelectric sources, such as Brazil. But we have ethanol, so we are not paying too much attention to cars running, to electric vehicles. But people are worrying, and people have made calculations on what's going to happen to the transportation in 30 years, 50 years. There is one thing that's very clear, people will not give up automobiles, in all the studies that exist. Well, there are some people proposing that you give up automobiles and drive a bicycle and all that. And some people are doing it, but to expect to do it in a very significant way is really, I think, a very optimistic way of looking at the world, presently, there are 800 million automobiles in the world. 800 million. The Chinese are producing many, many millions of automobiles per year. Some people have made calculations how much automobiles will have in the year 2035 or so. And there will be not 800 million, but probably 2 billion. And people then looked at the options for replacing fossil fuels, and there is a large space for biofuels. There is a space for electric vehicles. But I think that electric vehicles depend more on new technological developments with the batteries than ethanol. I don't want to sound as a sort of one-sided proponent of ethanol, but ethanol has the advantage that it's developed and it's here, and it's competitive in economic terms, So it's like having a, this is say in Portuguese that I'm not sure I can repeat in English. It's much better to have one bird in your hand than two birds flying. You have an expression like that in English?
Yeah, we do. We say a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush.
That's right.
How do you say it in Portuguese?
É melhor ter pássaro na mão do que dois voando. Which has exactly the same meaning.
I won't repeat it.
Okay.
Well, you sort of touched on something that I think is one of the things that we want to convey in the film, which is that there's going to be incremental changes in our energy systems to meet our energy needs. Like you're saying, like biofuels here now, let's you take advantage of it, and if there's something better later, we can take advantage of that then. And then also that, like you're saying, maybe if you have hydroelectric, then biofuel doesn't make sense. And maybe you could talk about how energy can be a very local resource, and maybe how decentralized our model could potentially be, as opposed to now where we all import from the same places.
Yes. A point that has been raised frequently, and people in the United States have been raising, that point is the following, is that in the last 50 years, there was a centralization in the way you produce and use energy. You see, electricity is produced in big dams, or big thermal power plants, or big nuclear reactors, and gasoline is produced in large refineries, and this and that and so on. And why don't we look at the problem in a more dispersed, decentralized way? Renewables are something that immediately comes to your mind, because as soon as you move from fossil fuels and nuclear energy to renewables, you confront that problem, because you don't have wind in all places. There is no wind. There's no wind in New York. Enough wind to produce electricity from windmills. But there is enough wind to produce electricity in Utah. So the renewable energies that we have are very geographically dependent. For example, look at Europe. Europe has a lot of windmills today. Where are they? They are in Denmark, northern Germany, not southern Germany, and Spain and so on, which are places in which you have a lot of wind. Then you look for other sources of renewable energies. You look at biofuels. You have biofuels in Brazil. You don't have biofuels, or basically you don't have biofuels in Europe. Or if you have, they are very, very expensive because geography does not favor that. So I think that as you try to reduce the use of fossil fuels, immediately you bump into systems that are more decentralized by nature. Hydroelectric power, for example, exists in some countries and does not exist in others. The potential for hydroelectricity in the United States, it's all used up. You cannot expand it anymore. All the places where you could put hydroelectric plants have been utilized, basically. You can expand it in Brazil, Africa. Africa has a good potential for that. And then there are people now with ideas that if you are really serious about solar energy, what you could do is to put in the roof of your house, if you live in a house, you could put photocells. And then these photocells will convert solar energy directly into electricity. It's a very interesting idea, because you cannot do that in Norway, or in some countries in which sun is not very abundant. But there are places in which there is plenty of sunshine, including the United States. But the idea of covering your roof with photovoltaics is a very interesting one, because the sun shines during the day. In general, you are not home during the day. You are not watching TV, you don't have your lights on and this and that and so on. So during the day, the electricity generated in your house can be sold to the utility. And in the evening, you buy it back. And you make the calculations, and that's feasible. And people are doing it, not in a large number, but they are doing it. The problem is that you have a problem of investment. Someone has to give you the money to cover your roof with photovoltaics. Which can be a significant amount of money, because photovoltaics is not competitive by itself. It's still expensive, but the cost of electricity from photovoltaics is going down, like ethanol and like the cost of automobiles and so on and so forth. It is going down, and it's a very interesting idea because it means that the grid will then be a decentralized grid. They call it smart grids. It's a familiar catchword for it. They're smart because there are sensors, computers, which tell you what to do. Either you purchase electricity or you sell electricity. These things do exist. There are in many houses in the United States, you set up your thermostat from your office. You work 5 miles from the place you live. Then you say, I left home and I left the air conditioner on. You press the button and you can disconnect it. And so this is coming. These are smart grids, and proponents of smart grids think that in 20 or 30 years we'll have a very decentralized system, and which I think is natural with renewable energies. And then with electric automobiles, that's probably what you will do, because during the evening, you plug your car into your home and you charge it from the electricity from the grid. During the day, you sell that electricity back to the utility, and it's being done, not in significant amount. You see, the present system is very resilient, and it is very convenient. I mean, the idea of falling in love with renewables, it's something that some people do, But if you if you take a detached view, it's not a question of falling in love, You have to make calculations, because they are difficult to introduce, The present system is very good. Unfortunately, that's the problem. is that unfortunately the present system cannot last. People have to convince themselves that that is the problem for the three reasons that I mentioned before, but I will repeat, Fossil fuels are exhaustible. They will not last forever. Second, they are hard to get. There are geopolitical problems in getting them. Third, they are the main source of pollution. So it's no use of saying, well, look, things are so good as they are, why don't we keep on, This system is going to crash, and as China develops, there will be more competition for oil, and more pollution. There is more pollution, actually. China is today the largest emitter of CO2 in the world. It surpassed the emissions of the United States.
This is amazing. I want to touch on. But I wanted